Musicality is a cornerstone of dance and also, I'd argue, with flow arts. It's also something that can be remarkably difficult to frame or teach. Drex here from Drex Factor Poi, sharing with you the love of poi spinning and flow arts to benefit your body and brain. Over the course of the past year, I've been posting videos breaking down my approach to how we dance with our props, and in this video, I want to zero in on one particular aspect of that: how we can add musicality to our flow and poi spinning. But before we dive in, I just want to give a quick shout out to the friends of the channel. Big thanks to Dark Monk, Fire Mecca, Flow Fests, Flow Toys, Juggling Calling, Pyroterror Light Toys, Spinballs, and Ultra Poi for helping to make the videos on this channel possible. You can learn more about all these amazing businesses and what they're doing to support flow artists like yourself by checking out the links that I've got down in the description of this video. And special thanks to non-business friends of the channel, Johnny Howard, Lane Machinsky, and Becca Bekkonen. Thank you all so very much for your support for my work and my mission. Without a doubt, one of the most frequent pieces of feedback that I get on my flow is that I have an excellent sense of musicality when I dance and spin. Which, fun fact, is also one of my favorite pieces of feedback to receive. And that's not by accident. It's a thing that I've worked to hone over the course of many years, and still something that I consider to be an active area of improvement and workshopping for me. And it is a thing that I'd love to pass on to other people, not only to see if I can get more flow artists out there dancing, but also to help give people who are flow arts adjacent a lens through which to view and understand our work. But before I can teach you how I approach musicality and flow, we should probably answer a very fundamental question. What exactly is musicality? Real quick, if you like videos on poi spinning and flow arts, make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you're the first to know when I upload a new tutorial, review, vlog, or flow session. Now back to the show. I have combed through a lot, and I do mean a lot of dance blogs and videos online searching for a simple, coherent definition of musicality. And much like how we use the word flow in a very amorphous sense, so too does the dance world have a very fluid approach to defining musicality. The definition I came across that I most identified with was this. So what is musicality? Some describe it as the way in which a dancer expresses music through their bodies and their movements. Others have described musicality as the dancer's ability to become one with the music. In short, dance musicality can be defined by how dancers hear, interpret, and move to music. I like this definition because it gels well with how I frame musicality in my mind. When I dance and spin to music, I'm trying to emphasize different accents, dynamic changes, and even lyrics as they pop up through that music. And I think this is something that a lot of people latch onto with my personal style. But it also has to be said that even this definition leaves a lot of room for interpretation and expression. Different people will experience different parts of music in different ways. Some will latch onto the nuances and dynamics of specific instruments, others to the groove and beat of the music. Many will focus on lyrical content or the unique phrasing of a vocalist, to say nothing of how specific this can be to genre or dynamics in the music itself. And of course, whenever you bring together two art forms, there's the question of how do they complement each other? Does our dance exist to support elements of the music or to emphasize features we think are important for the listener to pick out? Is the music merely background accompaniment or integral to not just our choreography, but also the message we are hoping to convey to our audience? Dance, like all forms of art, is always going to be more than a little subjective. But with that said, I know what I think looks good. I've been breaking down my own style of dance as well as the styles of other poi dancers I really respect to identify specific moves, techniques, and stylistic flourishes that add up to what I find appealing. Your mileage on many of these techniques may vary, but I still want to present what I've learned in the hopes that it helps other people who are navigating these same waters. In the course of that work, I've identified 5 key areas where we can emphasize elements of music. Those areas are beat accents, phrase accents, dynamic accents, vocal accents, and poi flourishes. You might be noticing that several of these correlate pretty directly to aspects of music as an art form itself, and that is certainly not by accident. So let's take a look at each of these areas and what we can do with our poi to accompany, enrich, and adorn the music that we are dancing and performing to. Let's start out with beat accents. In my mind, the absolute master of this form of musicality is the British poi spinner G. He has a style that uses a variety of different techniques to land percussive and staccato poi tricks right on the very beats of the music that he's performing to. His performance at San Francisco DCOM is a perfect example of this. I did a reacts video to this video last year where I go through his performance in detail, and I'll link to that in the video description, but here are some major takeaways for our current purposes. One of the biggest is that Poi 0 points make for a wonderful visual counterpart to the sounds of aggressive drums such as snares and kicks. Stalls and G-pops make for excellent moments when the poi seem to pierce the air in the same fashion that the drums do. Other tricks that work here include spiral wraps, shotguns, and vertical stacking. But are there ways to accent beats without having to do 0 points in order to get there? Yes, but they each come with asterisks. One of the best techniques I've seen is to time the tips of flower petals to hit on specific beats. You really have to emphasize the tips of those petals to make the effect land, however, as flower petals can frequently become a little mushy if you're not careful. Other alternatives include the use of tricks that perhaps don't have the sharp edges of 0 points, but do include direct movements either from the poi or the hands themselves. Examples here include linear extensions, 1.5s, and waist straps and fountains if you really make your arrival points pop. That's not to say we can't accent beats with curves, however. One great example of this in action is to time the downbeats of a pattern to land on the beat. Butterflies and the edges of carryover patterns like fountains and caps work well for this, but watch your timing. It's easy to get slightly off and the effect then will be completely lost. By the same token, we can emphasize beats by changing the volume of our poi movements in specific tricks. For example, we can perform static spin butterflies on the downbeat and expand them to full arm extensions on the backbeat. I made use of this technique a lot in my recent performance video to Goodbye by Who Was Fancy. I'd also be remiss if I didn't point out that there are some really special cases that happen very rapidly that we can use to accent drum fills. For example, staggered stalls in the style of Mel, or a personal favorite, Zan's Diamond, both work fantastically for this purpose. And of course, we have loads of options for what we can do with our bodies regardless of what the poi are doing to accent those beats too. We can do dime stops, kicks, pirouettes, and head checks, to name just a few, to land those beats as the poi spins in a variety of different ways. Bonus points. You combine body movement with the poi movement to really drive things home. Doing this with vertical stacking is easily one of my favorite techniques. And while I think the beginning of poi throws are a little too gooey to be a good accent, you can absolutely turn catching the poi into an accent, especially when you get your whole body into it. Try doing these with a head check, a pirouette, having the catch ricochet through your whole body. The possibilities are endless. You're staring me down, a glance makes me weak. Eyes follow striking. You'll note our beat accents run the gamut from being very sharp and specific to being a little softer. Put some thought into what the drums sound like in the song that you're dancing to and what contours of poi movement might be a good fit, not only for how the drums sound, but also how they make you feel. Of course, just hitting every or even most beats of a given piece of music would get pretty dull quickly. There's more going on in music than just the beat after all. There's also melody. Melodies can go up and down, they can move around a note before arriving at it. And they're also frequently one of the first elements of music that people hear and latch onto as they're listening to it. So how do we get poi to accompany melodies or phrases? Well, Here's a few ideas. Every melody has a place where it starts and it stops, as well as points where it sustains notes versus pausing or popping out more staccato notes. You can perform sequences of poi moves that line up with these patterns, creating phrases of poi movements that start and stop with the melody, or that punctuate those staccato notes with some of the same tools we used for beat accents. This definitely gets a little bit more subjective, but I also believe that sounds and melodies have shapes. Some melodies can be small and intimate, whereas others are sweeping and epic. Try moving your poi in ways that suggest those same shapes from smaller to larger movements. And of course, most melodies tell a story, even without the lyrics involved. You can act out the trajectory of that melody, taking it from places of hope to despair. Act out the way the melody feels with your body language and the volume of your poi tricks to see where that takes you. But there is another piece of music that I'd argue is one of the most important pieces of it, one in which there's a great deal of range and a lot of diversity in how it is explored, and that is dynamics. I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, so I first became aware of this in the alternative rock music of the 90s. Smells Like Teen Spirit made famous the habit of going from quiet verses to loud choruses, but that barely scratches the surface of the many ways musical dynamics are practiced. Let me show you some examples and how you can use your poi to accompany them. First up, one of the most common ways of distinguishing between different parts of a song is simply to change the melody or phrasing of the music. Likewise, you can change things up in any number of ways, from changing timing and direction to how you're phrasing your poi combos. You remember how we learned to accompany a melody in our last section? Here's your opportunity to switch things up. Another technique that's super common in pop-punk music is to do tempo shifts, going between normal and half-time or normal and double time. You can reflect that tempo change in your own spinning and either release or build tension. And of course, there's the Nirvana formula of going from quiet to loud. You can emphasize this shift with volume changes very easily because, well, it literally is a volume change. Another favorite dynamic shift I encounter a lot in popular music is switching rhythm phrasing between verses and choruses. For example, having very staccato verses that give way to choruses with more of an open and free feel. You can do the same with your poi. Switch between the beat accenting techniques that we discussed in our first section versus something that feels like it has more flow to it, connecting together different tricks and techniques that have a broader sweep to them. But not all dynamic shifts are purely about going from verses to choruses. Sometimes there are dynamic shifts that add or remove instruments, embellish sections you've otherwise already heard before, or drop out entirely to build anticipation. It's quite common for us as poi spinners to be obsessed with motion, but finding stillness can occasionally highlight the moments when we are moving. Think about this as a tool for when there's space in the music versus sections filled with instrumentation. And also bear in mind that you have a lot of options when dropouts do happen. You can use this as a moment of suspension in your accompaniment to seem at one with the music. you can choose to keep a movement that suggests a kind of stagnation in anticipation of the music returning. Pendulums are great for this. Doing this can help break up those drops for your audience and give them something to hold on to and help build anticipation or bridge gaps. One example of this I'd specifically like to cite is a recent video by Glowstringer Stacy Hatta, where she takes an extended build and basically works through 3 different sections of flow, showcasing different skill sets, so that when the beat finally drops, she brings all those styles together. It's a masterful approach to adding to what's going on in the music and finding ways to add to the audience's anticipation. Thus far, we've talked a lot about aspects of the instrumentation of music, but we've kind of left out the part that most people are listening for when they listen to pop music, and that's vocals. Part of where this gets tricky is that it's also usually one of the most personal parts of a song. A person can feel like they're speaking directly to you, or hit upon a lyric that summarizes concisely a feeling you never knew how to put into words. So how do you put something that can be so intimate into your movement? Well, here are a few suggestions. We can take some of the same tools that we used in our section on melody and phrasing and apply them here. What's the contour or the shape of the vocal line? Does a note get belted out? You can show that off with a broad sweeping poi move like an extension or in-spin flower. In this same vein, it can be challenging, but you can create movement phrases that feel both percussive and sweeping. Take poi movements like staggered stalls or stall chasers that both hit sharp accents, but also clearly are part of a bigger movement. When you bring them to a halt, it also reads as a rest.
We gotta start making changes. Learn to see me as a brother instead of 2 distant strangers. And that's how it's supposed to be. How can the devil take a brother if he's close to me?
But what about if we want to engage with the lyrics directly? Here's one suggestion. What if you think of the vocals as being a conversation? How would you respond to the person saying these things to you? Would you be angry, skeptical, approving, indifferent? Put that into movement, and it makes the music feel much more interactive. Is there a specific action or object mentioned in the lyrics? Try acting it out. This can really easily lead to moments that feel a little too cute or obvious, but it can also be a fun way to play off words that you like. Your mileage may vary. So we've covered a lot so far, from different aspects of instrumentation to vocals. But I also just want to point out something about our very premise that I think is really important. When we spin or dance to a piece of music, we are also adding our own art to it. We should strive not just to accompany that music, but to add to it. After all, there are things that poi can do that music or other forms of dance can't. What makes us unique, and how can we add that to this puzzle to create better choreography or performances? That's frankly a topic so big that it should probably be its own video, but here are a few quick suggestions. This first one is going to center around something really specific that I think poi does really well. Create incredibly dynamic and enormous volume changes. Going from a 3-beat weave to giants creates movement dynamics that most other kinds of dancers can only dream of. One example for those volume changes as a tool is to emphasize dynamics in music volume. We've talked about this a little already, but you have an opportunity with poi to showcase not just how epic the music sounds, but also how epic it feels as you take up space. Go big or go home. Another thing poi does really well, create really explosive tempo shifts. Because a poi is essentially a big third-degree lever. We can get the heads of a set of poi moving faster than any part of our bodies could ever hope to. We can combine that with our last example to use the volume, tempo, and levels of our spinning as a way to visually represent the ups and downs of both vocal and musical melodies. Hit a high note, hit a big high trick. Hit that chorus with a quick tempo shift too. But perhaps the thing Poi is best at is turning human movement into something a little bit more mathematical, geometric, or abstract. In the same way that college kids of my generation spent way too much time watching abstract visualizations on their computers as they listened to music. Wait, actually, is that still a thing? If you're under the age of 30, drop me a comment and let me know, yeah? Either way though, we can create a massive visualization tool out of a living human being with a set of poi. Get geometrical with your spinning. Take those shapes and use them to demonstrate how they can bring out different elements of the music and make them even cooler. How does the music feel with triangles? How does it feel with curves? How about with the tension inherent in caps? The sky's the limit here.
There's no way to wake up now. Too many times I saw you cry. No one can make up it.
So we have covered a huge amount of ground here, but the reality is we've barely scratched the surface. This isn't intended to be a comprehensive guide to absolutely every way that you can add musicality to your poi dance. It's meant to be a primer to get you inspired and give you ideas. As you explore the world of poi dance yourself, you're going to find lots of things that you think bring out specific elements of music or add to them. I can't wait to see what those turn out to be, so I can get inspired by you too. If you got anything out of this video, and I really hope you did because it took months to research and write, please consider leaving me a like, comment, sharing, and subscribing to help keep the conversation going, to help make sure this video will reach people who can benefit from it, and to help my channel grow. Also, real talk for a moment here, I can pretty much guarantee this video is going to get demonetized. I had to come up with specific examples of the aspects of music that I wanted to showcase here, and that means that all the ad revenue from this video will go to the people who wrote the music that I featured. And you know what? That's okay. I don't mind supporting musicians who have inspired me. But at the same time, if you dug this video and would like to see more like it, I would really appreciate it if you could support it and my future work by signing up over on my Patreon, just like all these nice folks did. My Patreon supporters very literally make videos like this one possible by giving me financial backing to invest enormous amounts of time into videos I'll otherwise never see a dime from. If you'd like to sign up, you can do that over at patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi. There you can get access to a whole host of rewards, including extra footage that didn't make it into this and other videos, and even better, you'll be making it possible for me to make more videos like this one. Give it a look, please, and thank you. Has all this inspired you to learn more about poi dance? Excellent! This is part of a series I'm doing trying to distill down everything I know about poi dance into instructional video form. You can see the other videos in this series by checking out the playlist that I'll link to down in the description, as well as up on screen if you are watching on YouTube. Also, the YouTube algorithm thinks that you might like this top video too, so give that a look as well. Thank you so much for watching. Get out and flow today, and I'll see you with a new video on Monday. Peace.